It's among the first days of spring, and I'm a very lucky boy indeed. That's because I've got Audi's new for 2017 R8. And not just any R8, but the V10 Plus. It's got 610 horsepower to the standard car's 540. It's got carbon ceramic brakes, and it makes one hell of a racket. Now listen, everybody knows the R8 as the everyday supercar. It's capable of being driven flat out on a racetrack, but also, quite sensibly, it's got decent ergonomics, it's got reasonable sound levels when you want it to, and that's all true with this 2017 model. But what it's added is a layer of sophistication, not just to the in-car electronics, but it's got keener turn-in. They've worked really hard at the front suspension and steering, and I think they've nailed it. Now, I've only had it on the mountain roads, but tomorrow I'm taking it to Daytona International Speedway, and we're going to run it around on the road course. The R8 shares the same chassis as Lamborghini's new Huracan, which we already know from Tim Stevens' drive is a brilliant car. I haven't had the pleasure of driving that yet, but even so, I'm not sure if I wouldn't really rather have this. It's a little bit more accessible price-wise. I don't know. It's got a little bit more of a distinct design statement to me. Designed to disguise a little bit of extra wheelbase and the long tail. One of the best things about this new R8 is it's got an updated version of the twin-clutch transmission that was featured in the mid-cycle update of the last R8. It's incredibly quick, 120 millisecond shift times. In fact, if you want that kind of old-school thwack in the back where it pins your head against the seat and you bob back and forth, this car just doesn't do that. So some people may say it's not visceral enough, but it's certainly more effective around a track and around a winding road like this one. So the V10 sounds great. I just wish it were a little bit more vocal. Even though there's a dual-mode exhaust here, it's not quite as assertive as something like Jag's F-Type, let alone the SVR version. One thing I do miss, at least a little bit, on a philosophical level, is the availability of a 6-speed manual transmission. The first generation car had a fantastic 6-speed lever right down here with a metal gate. It's like an old school Ferrari, but it actually worked better. It was more intuitive from gate to gate. Apparently not enough of those sold, so it's dual clutch or nothing. However, just leaving it in full automatic, especially when you've got it, the settings all ramped up, man, the transmission's brilliant. Some people say this car is a little too clinical, a little too polished. I have no idea what they're talking about. It just does everything right. So you probably want to know how much. This V10 Plus is optioned to around $200K, which puts it in some really heady company. But I think it holds up well. Scratch that. I think it holds up brilliantly. Customer R8s will spend an overwhelming majority of their time on the street, but that doesn't mean it's not important for them to perform on the track, especially the costlier V10 Plus. In this business, lucky schmucks like me, we get a fair amount of time on closed circuits. But getting the chance to rip around unchaperoned on an international temple of speed like Daytona? It's not just rare, it says a lot about Audi's confidence in this car. At Daytona, there's not just enough room to let the big dog eat well into high triple digits, there's corners and runoff to gain confidence in this car's handling. On a public road, even if you've got your big boy pants on, you might not find a corner large or untrafficked enough to feel confident pitching it in sideways. But out here on the road course, you can play, and you'll find your own limits well before you find those of the car. It's crazy, crazy fun. For a long time, it was possible to complain that Audis lacked for steering immediacy. Even some RS models, well, they just didn't feel as adjustable in the corners as you'd want. That was the all-wheel drive. It triggered a little too much front-end plow, taking steering feel along with it. But that's not the case here. If you drive the R8 conservatively, yes, you'll be met by predictable understeer. But grab it by the scruff, on the power, and you pitch it in, this car responds. It likes it a little rough. Credit the stiffer carbon fiber reinforced plastic bits in the chassis and a completely revamped front end, including its variable ratio steering rack. It's out here that you can begin to feel the 50% parts commonality with the GT3 race car that won the Rolex 24 here earlier this year. Look, I've said it before, and I'll say it again. In 99% of situations, street cars, they don't need carbon ceramic brakes. It's overkill. But if you track your ride, especially at a place like this that begs you to hit 160, 170, or well beyond, they're better than life insurance. Okay, so Audi isn't completely nuts. Despite letting us out here without pace cars, we've been limited to 3 laps at a time. They started the morning with a chicane, and now we're running the big track in the afternoon. But before you ask, it doesn't feel like it's because the car's engine or its brakes can't handle it. It's because we as drivers, we're not used to the G-forces of the high speeds of this place. It's way too easy to get punch drunk with speed. In fact, on both track and street, it's easy to get carried away with the R8's extraordinary dynamics. That's particularly true in Plus guys, which has put a little daylight between itself and the standard V10. This new R8 is everything the old car was. Beautiful, fast, and surprisingly livable. But this time, there's more layers and more personality to go with that perfection. Well, that makes all the difference in the world.
R6, good lane.